Hey guys, Tyler here. So, some of you may recall that I made a video a while back about the state of modern dating. If you haven't watched that yet, please go give it some love. Get it? I started out that video by mentioning an inflammatory post I'd seen on Twitter, which I subsequently couldn't find. Well, I'm happy to report today that I saw another inflammatory post, this time on Blue Sky, and I was able to find it. No, absolutely not. I will not allow 2000s nostalgia to become a thing. It was such a shit decade. It began with a terrorist attack and ended with a market crash, and everything in between was wars. Okay, where to begin? First off, you can't really stop 2000s nostalgia from becoming a thing. It has been for a while and it will continue to be a thing. Now, listen, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like these things didn't matter. They did a great deal. But this post got me thinking, why are we nostalgic in the first place? What is nostalgia? And is it just good, lighthearted sentimentality? Or is nostalgia, like, dangerous? Let's find out. Did you know that flavored air devices are quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping? It's an entire new movement towards better habits, led by today's sponsor, Fume. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device that fills the void ditching a bad habit can leave. You'll still have something to reach for. Fume draws flavor to your mouth through a passive diffusion system, but doesn't use vapor, meaning you can use it anywhere. No nicotine, so it's not addictive. And no batteries, so you'll never have to charge it. The device looks awesome, is perfectly weighted, and incredibly fun to fidget with. If vapor were compared to sticky soda, Fume cores are closer to herbal teas. They've got lots of delicious flavors to choose from, like crisp mint and orange vanilla. Based on my channel name, you can probably tell which one piqued my interest the most. Over 500,000 people have already made the switch to Fume as part of their habit change journey. If you're ready to try it for yourself, now's the time. For a limited time, if you order the Journey Pack using my code OrangeRiver, you'll get a free Fume topper, an awesome accessory to level up your experience. Go to tryfume.com/OrangeRiver or scan the QR code on screen to get yours today. Now, back to the video. Nostalgia is, broadly speaking, defined as a sentimentality for the past, typically a period or place with positive personal associations. More than that, it's further defined as a wistful yearning to return to that past, and specifically an irrecoverable condition. That last part is arguably what sets nostalgia apart from more generic fond memories. The fact that you explicitly cannot return to the time and place you're thinking about. This is generally why people are nostalgic for specific years or decades, and they'll say that their life was better back then. But this is the modern definition of nostalgia. Actually, the word's origins have more to do with the concept of homesickness than anything else. In fact, homesickness is actually the English translation of nostalgia, which is a compound of the ancient Greek nostos, to return home, and algia, or longing. It was coined in 1688 by Johannes Hofer, and it was originally treated as a medical condition, an illness felt by Swiss mercenaries who pined for the rural landscapes of their home country. Hence, homesickness. And this wasn't just a metaphor either. Nostalgia actually had symptoms that included fainting, fever, and, no joke, even death. During the first voyage of Captain Cook in 1770, the English naturalist Sir Joseph Banks used the word nostalgia in his journal, describing the condition of the sailors. Soldiers on the battlefield were also sometimes treated for nostalgia by being discharged and sent home, though receiving a diagnosis was generally considered an insult. By the mid-19th century, after scientists had failed for decades to identify where nostalgia came from in the body, it started to lose its status as a distinct disease. It was now seen as a symptom or stage of another psychological process, melancholia, which was frequent in people who committed But even as late as the American Civil War, nostalgia was still diagnosed among soldiers. That said, by the 1870s, medical interest in nostalgia almost completely vanished, though it would still be recognized in the First and Second World Wars, particularly among American soldiers. The fact that nostalgia can be triggered by something, though, must mean it has some kind of a neurological basis, right? Well, it's now understood that nostalgia is largely evoked by emotional stimuli passing through the amygdala, the emotional center center of the brain. Such stimuli can include things like music, films, TV shows, and video games. And indeed, this is often what people really mean when they are nostalgic for a certain time period: the culture. But nostalgia can also be triggered by natural phenomena like weather events and just environments in general. This is closely related to the liminal space phenomenon, the feeling of familiarity you get when you see a surreal image or video of an abandoned place. Like, for instance, I think we can all collectively say we've been in this office hallway before. And I also think this is why nostalgia still feels like a sickness to us. Even though nostalgia is usually associated with comforting memories, we often literally feel pain when thinking about the past because we know we cannot return to it. But we can't stop thinking about it either. I can't stop thinking about the past. Emotions are deeply intense.
Emotions run deep within our race.
But nostalgia can also evolve. One of the top trigger factors, music, is especially interesting. Scientists still aren't certain why we enjoy music the way we do when no other animal seems to have the same neurological capability. Even birdsong is only called birdsong by us because we assign a musical meaning to it, when scientifically it doesn't exist just for pleasure. When we listen to an old song far after we first heard it at a specific moment, it gives us a sense of nostalgia for the date we first heard it and the events that occurred on that date. But if the music is heard throughout our lives, it can lose its association with a specific period or experience. For example, the soundtrack to my 2019 documentary Teched Out is largely composed of tracks I licensed from the website Artlist, not a sponsor. I still use lots of these tracks in my videos today. For a while though, listening to them made me insanely depressed. I'm not kidding. Why? Well, think about it. While technically I downloaded some of them in 2018, working on that project I became intimately familiar with their melodies against the backdrop of the interview footage and B-roll.
Just like you occasionally see a goth nowadays, you're going to occasionally see a cyborg.
After the events of 2020, for a while I associated these tracks with a better time in my life. I was in college, I hung out with a larger circle of friends, and I was in a stable relationship. However, recently, as I've started to do YouTube full-time and listen to at least one of these tracks on average like once a week, they no longer have that association. Now, they're just banger beats. I'm still nostalgic for aspects of 2019, but the further away we get from it, the more nuanced that nostalgia becomes. To be clear, I'm not just nostalgic for 2019, because that would be kind of absurd, but for other years too. Particularly the decade from roughly like 2006 to 2015, when I was between the ages of 8 and 17. Like a normal person, I cringe at a lot of my memories from high school, but man, the 2000s and early 2010s were just simpler, weren't they? Sure, there were Iraq and Afghanistan and the recession, and all of those touched my family and me in a personal way. Not the show me on this doll kind of touch, you know what I mean. I had friends whose parents were deployed, and my dad had coworkers who were being laid off. It was a scary time. So I was optimistic about Obama becoming president. But beyond politics, this is when I first got interested, naturally, in Star Trek. The franchise that has had, without a doubt, the biggest impact on my life. Some people sneer at the J.J. Abrams films, but they objectively saved a flailing franchise, introducing it to a new generation of fans. I remember ordering Hot Wheels models of the Enterprise, the Narada, a Klingon bird of prey, you name it, and getting pretty excited when they arrived on my porch. This is also when I started making YouTube videos. First, dumb skits with my friends, but also, well, it was mainly dumb skits with my friends, since this is before I discovered socialism and started making Trek video essays. And the video games. My God, video games like objectively peaked years ago. Can we all agree on that? Even just going back a couple generations to the Wii, like, come on, it has objectively outdated graphics, but there are so many classic titles for that console. Don't worry, the PlayStation 4 era contained peak as well. But why am I nostalgic in particular for this period and not some other period of my life? If you were born a few years earlier, you'd probably be nostalgic for the early 2000s as well. I mean, what's not to like? This is when SpongeBob was good, some classic games like Metroid Fusion had just come out, and innovations in consumer technology felt like they actually meant something. Lots of older millennials seem to be nostalgic for the 90s. Star Trek Lower Decks creator Mike McMahon, born in 1981, is a Star Trek The Next Generation superfan, citing Season 7's Lower Decks as his favorite episode. Lower Decks itself, while definitely a product of 2020's cultural sensibilities, follows the general production design aesthetic of the TNG era and thus feels like a throwback to that generation of Star Trek. It's filled with references, and while I think it's a massive mistake to reduce the show to just nostalgia bait, it is there nonetheless. The fact that it takes place just a handful of years after Star Trek Nemesis, as opposed to the live-action Star Trek Picard series set in the early 25th century, and also filled with callbacks, is rather interesting to me. J.J. Abrams was born in the 60s and is a superfan of the original series, which was more rough and tumble, so in designing the look of the Trek reboot films, he created a world that feels more industrial and lived in, as opposed to the sleek, clean aesthetic of the TNG era. We all remember the obsession with 80s nostalgia that permeated the first couple decades of the 21st century. The Goldbergs, Stranger Things, you name it. For God's sakes, even Donald Trump's campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again," was literally one of Ronald Reagan's campaign slogans in 1980. And my parents, who were born in the 60s, are definitely nostalgic for the 60s, 70s, and 80s. By this point, I think it's pretty clear what the common underlying theme is here. People are nostalgic for the times that they were children and or young adults. And it's with this fundamental truth that nostalgia becomes double-sided, in my opinion. It's one thing to have fondness for your own past, but when you take it too far and try to recreate it in the real world, it can have damaging effects. In fairness, even shared nostalgia on a large enough scale can still be pretty harmless. Nostalgia is often a key motivator for preserving people's cultural heritage, including stuff like historical reenactments, which often facilitate socialization. And on the personal level, nostalgia has been linked to improving people's moods by serving as a coping mechanism during stressful times and helping people deal with loneliness. But when people start to perceive the past as being overall better than the present, that is a cognitive bias. Pining for the good old days when you're remembering your time in college is one thing, but when you force nostalgia onto other people through mass media, you risk art and culture becoming stale. I think we can all agree that Hollywood's current obsession with sequels and prequels and reboots is pretty tiresome. Even though I think the Star Trek reboot films are generally underappreciated by some fans, I can understand why people are upset at what Disney did to the Star Wars franchise. When Arrested Development was revived from cancellation for a 4th and 5th season by Netflix, the result was a pale comparison to the original first 3 seasons. And when nostalgia is implemented into political policy, its effects can be even more damaging. Want to go back to a time before we had vaccines, OSHA, and caps on carbon emissions? Well, congratulations, because that's the future we're racing towards at 90 miles an hour right now. Nostalgic rhetoric has often been used by conservative politicians to garner support for an agenda that seeks to strip away federal programs and agencies' powers to regulate the excesses of capitalism, like income and wealth inequality. I've made it a policy to never tell my audience who they should or should not vote for. It's not my business. But this is why you often hear people in the Republican base being accused of voting against their class interests. Conservative politicians will highlight some idealized version of the past, like the 1950s, and pick a scapegoat who they blame for taking away this ideal. Now, before you go off reacting negatively in the comments, even though it's pretty clear where I stand on this issue, I do think it is interesting to study from a historical and psychological standpoint. There are studies that have identified differences between conservative and liberal brains, which makes some sense as the two voting populations are more polarized today than they have been in a long time. When talking with friends of mine who have some conservative tendencies, because I live in the South, it's interesting to hear how they frame things. Everybody thinks they're right about everything, obviously. We wouldn't have the opinions we have if we didn't think they were correct. But there's also a nugget of truth in the idea that the past was better than the present. It just depends on what context you're talking about. The period immediately following World War II, all the way up to roughly the early 1970s, has been called the golden age of capitalism. Cost of living, particularly in Western countries, was extraordinarily lower than it is today. The minimum wage in the United States was closer to a living wage on which you could actually support a family, unions were more powerful, lots of students benefited from things like the GI Bill, and towns across America had more robust manufacturing industries that offered plenty of well-paying jobs with good benefits. But, well, if you weren't white, it kinda sucked. If you were a woman, it kinda sucked. If you were gay or trans, you usually kept that to yourself, lest you risk getting fired from your job or harassed by the police. It wasn't like this everywhere all at once. Blacks and women held various positions of power and garnered respect and influence in popular culture, and there were gay bars in metropolitan areas like New York and San Francisco. But society at large was more conservative back then. Today, being a minority still isn't easy, and in lots of places, voting and reproductive rights and protections for LGBT people have regressed. But public support for equality is a night and day difference with decades prior, and it's not even remotely close. Yet, economically, it's just harder to exist in the 2020s than it was even 10 years ago because of things like inflation and corporate greed. Homeownership? What's that? So, in a nutshell, nostalgia is illogical. It's a subjective personal experience that is different for everyone by definition. And as such, it can be difficult to reconcile with actual objective reality, both past and present. And future. Okay, I can't make this video without talking about something else. You may not have known this, I certainly didn't until doing research for this video, but nostalgia also has a future-focused counterpart, Forestalgia. Coined in a 2023 paper in the Journal of Advertising, Forestalgia is an individual's yearning for an idealized future. As a Star Trek fan, I can relate to this immeasurably, since Trek is pretty much the quintessential example of an optimistic future for humanity in popular sci-fi. There's no disease, hunger, poverty, racism, or war on Earth, and in addition to a post-capitalist political and economic structure, technology has enabled a seemingly utopian standard of living. Now, I've made various videos recently discussing how plausible Star Trek's future really is. Even for diehard fans, it's difficult to see such a future emerging by the 22nd, 23rd, or 24th centuries, and even if it did, human nature suggests it may likely collapse in on itself, resulting in a return to scarcity. But I've also argued that the mere depiction of a utopian society in Star Trek has always been important, as it's inspired people to create innovative technologies, become astronomers and politicians, and just seek to improve people's lives in general. Even if this fight is constant, even if we're forever chasing a better future, it's still worth it. But let's be real, we're kind of living in the future right now. You know what I mean? 2025 isn't a real year, it's a year from dystopian fiction. We have access to the world's information at our fingertips. We can have virtually any product imaginable delivered to us in the span of 2 days, and it sucks. The world is literally on fire. Our politics are toxic. Hell, just even interacting with other people online is toxic. Do y'all realize how many commenters I have to ban on a daily basis? It stinks. But we're stuck with it, just like we're stuck doing Microsoft Excel every day for the rest of our lives. Actually, for me, it's Google Sheets. The future we've been granted is not what a lot of us expected, but that's probably because we've been blinded by Forestalgia. We feel like the future we were promised has been robbed from us, and we're kind of right about that. And listen, I'm not just talking about the, pardon my French, boomer version of Forestalgia, the flying cars, the robot maids, all of that. We may never have flying cars because, frankly, they'd be super dangerous, though we have kind of had AI assistants for years. But I'm also talking about the Forestalgia from when I was a kid. When I was in elementary school, before 2009, I was bombarded with proclamations about how self-driving cars would be ubiquitous in 10 years, solar power would be within 20, and we'd be on Mars within 30. Then the Great Recession happened. A lot of these predictions were levied by futurist Ray Kurzweil, who has become notorious in recent decades for making many bold predictions, mostly about transhumanism and the supposedly impending technological singularity, when technology becomes so sophisticated that it outpaces our ability to control it. I've made multiple videos where I'm critical of this mindset because it ignores the fact that investment in technology, both public and private, comes and goes in waves. Progress isn't linear, and there are some hurdles we just can't seem to get past. Indeed, Kurzweil was criticized in 2009 for many of his past predictions, including that the American economy would continue to grow. Bro missed one of the most profound events to happen this century besides 9/11, even though there were warning signs ahead of time that the housing bubble was going to burst. As a matter of fact, much of the futurism in popular culture from my early childhood was predicated on this idea that the economy would continue to grow indefinitely, that technology would continue to advance indefinitely, exponentially even, and that climate change wasn't going to be nearly as devastating this century as it already has been. The aftermath of the Great Recession has seen trillions stolen from the working class as governments continue to bail out the very people that caused the problem in the first place. And in the 2020s, the AI boom has demonstrated that big tech has essentially run out of ideas and is forcing this crap down our throats to justify their own existence. Since computing and hardware advancements have largely been solved for years, the field of AI has experienced various so-called winters in the past where investment and thus progress slowed down. And I think another one is probably on its way. In this way, I actually think that the future will, in many ways, largely resemble the present for years to come. A sort of technological plateau, if you will. The accelerating changes promised by technological hype cycles are but an illusion. The fact is, technological advancement peaked years ago, and it has been slowing down, and it will probably continue to slow down. We've essentially figured out cell phones, computer graphics, gaming hardware, and several other technologies. Remember Google Glass? Yeah, call me skeptical, but I don't think hardware limitations are the only reason those didn't catch on. If they tried to bring them back, I think they'd fail again because they look stupid. Nobody's gonna wear that. The use cases for needing to be able to see a computer screen in your entire field of vision are so niche that only a subset of the consumer market is ever going to find it appealing, I think. We've had augmented reality for years, but it hasn't radically transformed the way we communicate with each other or go about our daily lives. Snapchat filters are one thing, but you wouldn't want to look at that 24/7, would you? This is also the reason I've never really connected with VR, and I'm not just talking about the fact that it makes me nauseous. Can I say something? Why have we as a society bought into this idea that VR has made it yet? VR headsets are not comfortable or easy to wear. They were bulky in the 90s, and they're bulky today. I'm not saying there can't be future miniaturization to make VR more accessible, but I don't think we're really headed for Ready Player One anytime soon. Similarly, I think that human exploration of the solar system is also going to continue hitting several snags. Since the 90s, it's been largely recognized that robotic exploration of the universe is just cheaper and more reliable. Again, I think going to Mars is something we should do, but I'm not sure how old I'll be when it happens, if it does in my lifetime. Again, I really hope it does, but we'll see. Extrapolating out into the far future, I'm actually kind of starting to think that human interstellar exploration is kind of a fantasy. I'm not saying it could never happen, but the economics of fuel consumption and the vast travel distances and times between stars means that a lot of alien civilizations probably just stay in their home systems, hence why the sky seems so quiet. I've been a consistent advocate of investing into space exploration because the unexpected side benefits you get out of that kind of stuff have significantly improved our lives. Just look at the thousands of NASA spin-off technologies. But I also think that we should start investing more into the life sciences, fighting disease, improving artificial limbs and organs, etc. And as far as what the future will look like in a literal sense, that sort of silvery, beveled aesthetic that we commonly associate with the future also doesn't feel very natural.
Why is everything chrome?
Everything is chrome in the future.
The real world is gritty, grimy, and grungy, and I think it will continue to be gritty, grimy, and grungy, absent some authoritarian government that enforces sterility on public spaces. What was this video about? Oh yeah, nostalgia. So, to answer the questions I posed in the intro, we feel nostalgia because it's a response to emotional stimuli, and it can often have positive health benefits. But when nostalgia is taken too far, it can hold back society. We typically feel nostalgia for when we were younger, and importantly, even though we may have positive memories of our childhood homes and media from decades past, we aren't necessarily nostalgic for the politics of those eras. And finally, nostalgia is illogical because we can't return to the past, but thinking about it can be inspirational. In addition to that social media post I showed at the beginning of this video, another reason I wanted to make this is because I've often wondered if there's such a thing as a year where humanity peaked. Some will say it was the 90s because that was before the tumultuous events of the 21st century, which is understandable, but technology was less advanced and a lot of the art from the 90s sucked. Others will beckon for a return to the 50s when wages were higher but freedoms were lesser. And others will argue the peak was more recent, like 2015, right before the latest era of polarization in our politics. Or even 2019, right before the COVID-19 pandemic. But then again, some people will self-report that their lives are actually better now than they were in the past. Kind of an anti-nostalgia. For me, it's mixed. I liked a lot about the pop culture and activities my friends and I were involved in before I was an adult, but that was before I had this platform and have the following and the income that I have now. I don't think it's fair to say that humanity peaked at any moment, because what that means depends on the context. As I illustrated earlier, technological advancement has certainly peaked. Moore's law is reaching its physical limit. But regardless of technology, socially, there really isn't a time or place on Earth where everybody and everything was universally better off than they are today. And in any event, the entire concept is utterly laced with nostalgia. At the end of the day, nostalgia is but a feeling. If we could actually revisit the past, it wouldn't be nostalgia. That would be time travel, and that violates the laws of physics. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. By the way, what years or decades are you nostalgic for? Let me know in the comments down below. And big thanks once again to Fume for sponsoring today's video. Go to tryfume.com/OrangeRiver or scan the QR code and use code OrangeRiver to get your free Fume topper when you order your journey pack today. With that, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a thumbs up down below and don't forget to share it. That stuff really helps me out. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to do that as well so you won't miss future uploads, and click the bell icon to receive all notifications. If you want to support my work even further, you can become a patron at patreon.com/OrangeRiver, link in the description, or become a YouTube member by clicking the join button on my channel page. By becoming a patron or member, you also get access to awesome perks like behind the scenes photos and videos, patron and member only polls, name in the credits, merch discounts, and more. Or you can drop a one-time super thanks or PayPal donation. All are appreciated. Links to my PayPal, as well as my social media and merch store, are in the description too. Also, just as a reminder, I do have a second channel, OrangeRiver Plus, where I've uploaded the VODs of lots of my gaming streams, with more on the way. And in addition to some other goofy one-offs and extra behind-the-scenes content, I've officially made it my second streaming platform, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. That's all I have for this week. I'll see you next time.
Hey you! Yes, you! Sitting there on your ass! It's me, the ghost of Dr. Asukaza, coming back from reptilian hell to deliver you another very important message. The reason why I died is because that asshole killed me in the first issue. Like seriously? You impaled me? But whatever. Put down your replica of the Enterprise and listen up! Issue 3 of Star Trek Endurance is now available for patrons and members of OrangeRiver. Just sign up for $2 or more at patreon.com/OrangeRiver or click the join button on OrangeRiver's YouTube channel page. If Erica could figure it out, you can too. By the way, a lot of people seem to think I'm a Gorn. Well, I'm not a fucking Gorn, I'm a Nalish, you assholes. Look it up. We were in the animated series. It's canon. Anyway, back to reptilian hell.
Do you like merchandise? If so, head on over to the new and improved OrangeRiver merch store. That's right, OrangeRiver is now officially on Spreadshop. I've got a bunch of awesome new designs, including All the Way Down,
All the way.
Vape God, Callie, aka Best Girl.
It was totally worth it.
And what is perhaps my greatest design yet,
I love being married to my husband.
plus I've got some of my classic designs like OrangeRiver Arrowhead, N7, Metroid, Mycelial Network,
The mycelial network is like
Mycelial Network, and more. And there are even some new products like OrangeRiver hats. That's right, OrangeRiver hats now exist. Visit the link in the description to get discounts and other special deals on items from my store.